Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. I work with people to help them step into effective leadership and realize their professional and personal goals. If you have known failure and success, if you have had good bosses and bad bosses, if you are a high achiever and want new ideas, and if you want the practical and tactical side of things, then you are in the right place. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. We are joined by Brandy Willis. Brandy, welcome to Leveraging Leadership. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Emily.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So let's jump right in. You are a 4-time EA turned Chief of Staff. So just to kind of give us context, what was your EA life like?
Crazy, busy, much the same as today. But I think that really set me up to be more successful and more productive. And then I also think my role now really helped me focus on those relationships that you have to build and the importance of building those and having all of that.
Yeah, EA to Chief of Staff is a fairly common trajectory and progression. So everyone likes to hear, how did people make that transition? Because there's certainly overlap and there's skills that you can and should be using as Chief of Staff as well, but it's also an entirely different role, a different ball game as you know. So one of the unique things about your Chief of Staff role is your principal oversees 9 companies. So it's not just, I'm a CEO for one company. I have maybe 9 different departments within that company, which is a lot by itself. He's one of those folks you described as always likes to be busy and always likes to be going a million miles a minute and being very involved and engaged with a whole bunch of different things. So just give us an overview of the setup there. So you have your principal and he's overseeing different companies, some within the same industry and some not. So how does that go?
Yeah, so we have a lot. I think at the last count, he really oversees, we have about 9 of them. And his wife now has her own company, but he and her are the majority owners of most of our companies. And depending on the company has different shareholders or things of that nature for our board. But it's really interesting because it all goes from ranching, events, planning to medical, dental, staffing, recruiting. So it really all depends on the needs. And I always tell him, he'll say, well, I need some downtime. I need some focus. Sure, I'll block it out, but then I'll have, oh no, on this day, we've got an X, Y, and Z. Oh, on this day. Well, I'm sorry, we don't have downtime anymore.
You've just overridden your downtime. Yes. Yeah.
Hey,
maybe do 8 companies instead of 9 if you really want downtime. Just throwing ideas out there.
Right.
Very cool. So what is his time split across the 9 companies? Is he, I'm just making this up, but does he spend the majority of time in like 5 or does 3 take up 80% of his time? What does that look like?
So he would thoroughly enjoy if I allowed the ranch and our retreat events company that we're building up to take up 90% of his time.
Okay.
He would much rather.
He has a favorite.
Yeah, for sure. However, he has had staffing companies before, so we know with Anyplace MD, we know that they've had a bit of challenges because it's been a pivot company. It was really changed, and COVID really, really changed a lot for us for that company because we became a COVID responder. We set up monoclonal infusion centers across the nation, and that really skyrocketed. But then after the decline of that company or of COVID, that company, we're working more specifically on that. And so I would say, for the most part, he would really enjoy the ranch. But then in the retreat, but I would say it's probably a good 20% what we call our big 4, the 4 that we have here's housed at our corporate location, 20 to 30% of that. and then the rest is he helps his wife with her other company, Success Strategies, and then um, focuses on the ranch, getting hunters out to the ranch and doing those kinds of things.
Okay, great. And so how do you I mean, for a chief of staff to be ingrained and integrated into one company is a full-time job. So how do you organize your day and your time and keep the different companies straight? How do you go about that?
So my first focus really here is going to be on our staff here. So it's the needs of our staff here on site. Because our ranch and retreat are housed about an hour and a half north of us for that particular venue and location. Usually that range manager will reach out if he needs something, or the bookkeeper for those entities is also here on site. So if she needs something, I step in and help her. So it really just depends on the prioritization on what's more important. So are we trying to onboard people? Are we trying to get people oriented and starting, or are we trying to take care of financials, or are we planning some events? It kind of depends on the priority.
And when you say take care of the staff here, is that at the ranch or is that at kind of a shared services company? What's that look like?
Yeah, it's here in a corporate office here in Cedar Park where we call it the big four. So the
Okay.
four major companies. So DHMS, Anyplace MD, Capital Dental Equipment, and Anyplace Audiology are housed here in our office here at our corporate, I guess you would call it our corporate office. And so we also have accounting and
Okay.
shared services, as you said, like marketing and IT, all of those staff. So any of our managers that run any of the other companies are also here at this office as well.
Okay. So there's kind of like a hub of operations that has spokes into these big four, and then your primary time is spent there.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And
Okay.
then if we have an event or something where I need to go to the ranch, recently we had a retreat out at the ranch. So we all went up there for a couple of days. And so that was real fun. But, I go where I'm needed really, but mostly here.
Yeah. So you spend most of your time supporting the big four, and then as all chiefs of staff are, you're kind of a sweeper role. So like, let me, if your principal needs to deploy you into like, I actually need some help over in this company, you like whoosh, like parachute up and go into go into that one, smoke jump into that one. Um, and is there
Yeah.
anything where like, do you have like email addresses to each one, like 9 different email addresses? Like, how does that kind of work?
Thankfully, it's all filtered through mostly one.
Okay. Okay. And then what is he primarily spending his time doing? Is it, I don't know, for depending on the stage of the different companies, is it fundraising? Is it, no, these are mature companies? Is it growth oriented? Kind of what activities is he spending his time doing?
So currently, right now, one of our companies, DHMS, we're working on. It's really a government and a correctional facility contracts company, and we have a lot of mobile vehicles. I think we have 5 mobile vehicles that we dispatch to sites, and our contract that we had ended last year. So we're working on getting new contracts for that company and then also kind of scaling down a little bit and getting rid of some of the equipment. So he's spending a lot of time focusing on his contacts who can help us get rid of them, get rid of some of the supplies, sell the supplies, things of that nature. And then also, we're also working to get more contracts. And we just secured another contract in Georgia, and we're working on a new bid that just came up, I think last week even.
Okay, so he's in that realm. And then what types of initiatives do you run point on? So if he's kind of doing the contract pieces and working with the government agencies, what are you spending your most of your time doing in the big four or across the full nine?
Yeah, so right now, I'll help our staff. So we're responding to some full forms, making sure staff are taking care of getting those filled out timely. If they have questions, I'm also working on a lot of operational things, getting some policies and procedures that kind of went by the wayside when we got real busy. So we're trying to get those back streamlined and people following those. We have some proprietary software that we created several years ago that has a couple of glitches. So I'm working with the to get that back working correctly, and a software developer to make sure that is working for all of our new contracts because we really need that software to run our DHMS division really successfully, and to invoice timely because right now we're just invoicing manually, and that is
Yeah.
painful.
Yes. Yes. That would be painful. And then,
Yeah.
so, we have a little bit of a glimpse into the personality of your principal and how action packed and action oriented he is. How do you keep him on point, or how do you keep him focused on where he needs to be, the highest value activities for him?
I would say reminders. He is not one that's in his email. He relies on me to do all of that. And I'll say it's finding out what works for him. So I'll screenshot an email and shoot it over. I will literally, he was just on a vacation, a skiing trip with his wife for her business. And so I was like, wait, don't forget this at this time. Send him text reminders, things like that. And
Shocking.
he's like,
A
oh,
chief of staff having to follow up and remind people multiple times.
yeah.
That never happens.
But, he's really good. He loves the reminders. Like, it's something I have never experienced before to where he's like, "I missed this. Thank you. Thank you. I missed it," So that's really refreshing for me.
Well, it sounds like you're translating. I mean, some people just don't like email. That's not their mode of communication. And so being able to translate that, even if it's literally taking a picture of it and say, here, read it on a text screenshot. But if that works for him and that what's worked for, responses and getting information back, then that's what you kind of have to figure out as a chief of staff. So
Yeah, and I think it's figuring out what works. I think it's also helpful knowing the people you work with and for and in coordination with their personalities. Because my personality, I'm very type A, planned, methodical, everything. He is not. He will go rogue. But it's also knowing those things you know, about each other, knowing how type A I am, and then how rogue he really knows he is.
type A and rogue. Sometimes those make a good
That's
pair,
right.
though. Yeah, sometimes those make a good complementary skill set. So you've mentioned his wife a couple times, and it sounds like you're not only chief of staff of kind of the business side of things, but also overseeing some of the personal side. And I know that she is very involved in the community. You mentioned she has her own business. So what does kind of that piece look like?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think we spoke about this before where, if I'm like, "I need this," and he'll tell me, "Well, you better tell her because 'cause I'm not telling her." And I mean, literally just this morning, her assistant was in here, her executive assistant was in here, chatting with me about something, and I was like, "Oh, is she gonna go and do XYZ today?" And she said, "Oh, I haven't heard from her." And I said, "Okay, okay." 2 seconds later, she walks in, and I was like, "Oh, literally, here's our answers right here." So I just spewed everything I had, got her answers, and took care of everything we needed right then and there. And so I was like, she was like, "Well, this is perfect timing." I said, "Well, I think that's how it works sometimes for
You're
us."
the buffer between
Yes.
the husband and wife. Husband was like, I'm not touching that thing. So Brandy, you handle that.
"You want a receipt? You want a policy? You better figure it out with her."
That's awesome. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
I know she does involvement in the community, and she's trying to combat this opioid crisis we have going on across the country. Do you help chief of staff those types of things, or is that a bit separate and you're just aware of them? How does that work?
So, really only as it relates to her EA. So her EA, helps with most of those things, but if she has questions, she's a first-time EA, it's one of her first roles outside of college, and was referred to us, and she is a delight to work with. Um, I think that's what really makes it exciting, because for her to come in and she's just taking it and running, but if she needs questions on how do we get meals or how do I get this or what do I do, I help her give her solutions and help guide her in her daily tasks as well as some of the bigger projects that they work on together.
Okay. Okay. And then since you've been an EA several times, and it sounds like you're kind of shepherding a brand new EA into the role, what advice would you have for EAs who are looking to transition into the chief of staff role, or maybe are in seat and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a whole different ball game? Is there any words of wisdom you would have there?
I would say that it's important to understand your principal, because the more you understand them, and I understand I work a certain way, but understand how they work and how the way you work can add value to the way they work. Because my boss and his wife, they're two different personalities, but I have to understand both of them in order to make them work together successfully, which is also like for Bella, I explained to her, like, this is how Jen works. This is how Shane works. This is how we combat the chaos, you know? And so I would just say, learn that first. And once you can learn your goal, and then make yourself invaluable. Like, make sure you know the business inside and out. You'll hear him tell people sometimes, she knows the business more than I do now. Like, I don't, wait, who do we bank with? Wait, what do we do? Wait, what? You know? And so I think making yourself invaluable to the company. And for me, it's to the feet. Because I support them in so many different ways, making yourself just learning. I think every single day I still learn something new.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the mark of a good EA, chief of staff, any business professional. If you are continuing to learn and
Mhm,
continuing to dig in and get your hands dirty, then you know it firsthand, and you're able to provide value at a different level. Um,
mhm.
how would you mentioned, really getting to know your principal, and I'm imagining if someone's listening say, "Okay, I understand that, but how do I do that?" Let's say they don't have any experience with this person, and they're coming from an EA role at another company, and they're trying to dive into this chief of staff thing. Okay, I know the relationship with my principal is important. How do I kind of foster that relationship or set that foundation?
So I'm really lucky in this position because we have this personality assessment we do before we're hired and before we hire people that tells us kind of our traits.
Yeah.
I am very lucky because my boss knows his traits, his strengths, and his weaknesses. And so where he knows he's weak, I'm strong. So I have that as an advantage. I also, though, would say listen to every phone call. Listen to every single thing you can and absorb the information. Because I can tell you how he's going to respond after 3 years of being together. I can tell you how he's going to respond probably 95% of the time.
Yeah, I just wanna
And
jump in there. So, like, listen to the calls, like, legally, don't, like, tap his phone or
no, no,
something.
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And he always knows, like, if you see the door back there, that's his office there. It's really difficult for me not right now because he's on a call, not to listen to the call while conversing with you, because even if I'm busy in my own stuff, I'm still listening to what's going on, because a lot of times he'll say, "Oh, yeah, I'll have Brady do that, and I'll just get it done right when he says it instead of
Oh,
waiting
wow.
for a task list." And so it's being proactive too, things like that, like, "Oh, yeah, I'll just have Brady send you over an email or, P&P or whatever it is, and then I'll just do it right then and get it done," and he's like, "Hey, can you" "Already done." "Well, okay,
Wow.
great," you
That's, like,
know?
your real-time action. Okay, interesting.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
I think it's important to do that, because if you don't, so many times we get pulled in so many different ways that you end up with a task list that's gonna take you hours to combat, when I could have just said, "Oh, pause, send, take care of it," because it'll take me 10 minutes to go and, start addressing the task list. And then you get into, sometimes, you have more questions than answers, and if I do it right then, it's done, question, and he doesn't have to worry about it.
So it sounds like, there's some things where I think it's funny that uh, you politely eavesdropping on his conversations with his full knowledge, and then
Oh, for
sometimes you're
sure.
saying, "Okay, there is this task I can just knock out. So, like, let me just do this one right now, pause what I'm doing." I'm sure there's others where, like, that's a bigger list. Let me go write that down and think about it. But that real time, and I think, to the point of getting to know your principal, like getting reps or getting exposure with them. So if you can listen to a call, be a silent party, just listen to the call and see how they show up or what things they ask or what things they're taking in. If you can sit in
Mhm.
on meetings, and I've been on several meetings as chief of staff where I'm literally like, there's a table full of people and I might be at the table, but I might be against the wall. If there's a whole bunch of people against the wall, just listening and like looking at everyone and taking in that whole situation and how your leader shows up. So getting any sort of exposure like that. I have several chiefs of staff who travel with their principal, and
Mhm.
travel time is a really good way to get exposure too. So I think that's good advice for how to get to know your principal. And then the other thing you said, which was spot on in my opinion, is becoming invaluable and getting really in the weeds, but also staying strategic, but getting to know the business. Do you have any specific advice on that about, here's the areas I found to be most useful to get really ingrained with, or kind of these types of things lend themselves well to learning about the business? Anything like that?
Well, it really depends on the business. The businesses that we have that do, like, government contracts, I think it's important to understand the ins and outs of winning a contract, bidding a contract, and those types of things. I also, get in on a lot of meetings that I just jump in from his calendar, and it'll show that I'm in as me. But I also do that so that I understand sometimes the process, because if we work with a new entity that we've not had an actual contract with, it's knowing their agreements, their processes, finalizing those things. It's also knowing sometimes what I can sign off for and what he's agreed to on the call, so that when the document comes over, if it aligns with the call, I don't even have to put it in front of him. I could just handle it. And so, it's it's so in like, it's there's so many moving things all at once. Um, but I think for us here, it's knowing how we can best help our staff to accomplish these small goals individually.
Mm. Yes. All right. Anything else in terms of, time management? Because you've got to be a wizard at that with 9 companies, or kind of family dynamics. Because I know a lot of chiefs of staff do work for family owned businesses, and often there's original founders who are either a husband or wife, or a husband and wife team. So, any final thoughts or pieces of advice there?
I mean, it's really just for me, once I was able to, um, be more objective, and not letting your personal feelings or your personal thoughts get in the way of your success. Because so many times you'll have principals who, for instance, um, believe one way, but you don't agree with that, or you believe opposite. It's understanding that everybody has their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own things. So it's being able to contribute without providing your own feelings, your own personal feelings, but being more objective, is really the way I try to focus and be more successful with my leaders, my staff, and the team here. Just because, in general, that's what's where I have been able to understand people better.
Yeah, being objective. Yeah, not having an opinion. You have your own opinions and thoughts, of course, but being able to kind of just take a step back and create that distance, I think, is
Yeah,
helpful.
and knowing it's okay to have your own opinion, and knowing that if you don't agree, you can still make that opinion. You can still make the choice. You can still do what the principal or the business needs that's best. Whether you agree or not, it's what's best for the business.
Yeah.
And so I think that too many times, sometimes, even EAs and chiefs of staffs maybe impart some personality. you
That's a good
know,
way to say it.
Yeah, where, we don't really maybe need that personality at that time.
Mm,
And so I think for me, it's, um, being more mindful of that, and being more objective and things like that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Brandy, thank you so much for sharing. And you certainly have a unique setup as chief of staff. So I think that'll be interesting for people. But thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Emily.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.